Hello there folks, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. I am Ash, your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Welcome to the fireside at Oak Lodge on a brutally chilly early evening here in southern England, where I am contemplating one of the great mysteries that I've noticed in the current generation, and it's permeating across all generations of recent years. And that is the lack of adventurousness in society that we live in today. Do you know what? I went to a play just the other night with my family, and it was a great play called The Terra Nova, in which it was a retelling of the story of Robert Falcon Scott, one of the British polar explorers of the early 1900s. And it was a tragic story because, he doesn't, no spoilers, but he doesn't survive it to the end. But it was a heck of a story of adventure and people experimenting with their lives to take the life journey to the very next level. And it dawned on me, that we live in a society today where very few people operate outside the safe bubble which they have come to surround themselves in. And I sat down and, it got me thinking, I could sort of flesh out a video around this. Is it true, or is it just my perception that the current generation, the current body of men in society are less adventurous than they've ever been in the past? Or is it just because we don't hear of great expeditions, as I talk about the Terra Nova expedition? Is it something because they don't exist anymore? We've achieved all those global goals. We don't have the opportunity to build reputations on these great things, and as a result, men have become settled, particularly in the Western world, where one would argue life is fairly easy for us. We're not sort of spearing gazelles to eat, are we? We are living a rather straightforward existence. So I did a little bit of digging to satisfy myself that is it true? Is the world less adventurous than it is? And you know what? I wasn't surprised when the answers came back the way they were. It is absolutely true that many of the current generation of younger men, and I say younger men, I'm talking about between 20 and 30 now, instances that we used to consider sort of risky and even masculine, wrongly, by the way, I don't agree with them at all, but it's things like smoking. Smoking is at an all-time low in the Western world, not in the developing world where people are yet to perhaps see the error of that path. But in the Western world, smoking's down. Drinking alcohol, certainly in the UK, I'm going to guess is at an all-time low in the last 100 years because young people today are choosing these safe, healthy lifestyles. Delinquency among young people. I used to be a police officer for 23 years. I was forever picking people up off the floor on a Saturday night after they'd had a fist fight or they'd had a gut load of beer, and that is at an all-time reduction right now. Right, instances of crime, delinquency is on a down, and many of the other things, drug use is decreasing. Now these are good things. Obviously, I'm not decrying the positivity of these things, but again, it all builds into this bubble where people are living increasingly safer and safer lives. And when you delve into it a little further, you then come to see the negativity of this attitude that people are no longer, have the mindset, let's have a go for it. Because house purchases are reduced. People opening businesses, trying new entrepreneuring activities in a younger stage. Fiscal risk, gambling, all reducing as people retract deeper and deeper into this safe bubble. And we live in a gamble-free world where none of us say, let's give it a go, let's have a try. And that worries me a little bit. As the father of a young man, I do think to myself, I want my son to be safe. Of course I do. It is the goal of every parent to see their children outlive them and be better and more successful than you are yourself. But at the same time, I also want my son to live life, to embrace it, to enjoy it, not to, live at home and play games only on a PlayStation. But modern life seems determined to nudge younger people, and I say younger, I'm going to say even guys up to my age, I'm in my mid-50s, right? Guys of my age are the same. We're becoming safer. We don't have a go for it anymore. We don't give it a try. And why is that? Why is modern life nudging us that way? Well, it's economic insecurity. Maybe people no longer feel safe to go into property ownership because property prices are going so high. Careers are less linear than they ever used to be. People tend to bounce around, take different jobs throughout a lifetime. They don't have the stability of at least having a solid job behind them so they can go out and try different things. And moving abroad, opening a business, it seems to be that this is on the decline. And the nudging towards play it safe, don't take any gambles, stay at home, have an easy life, don't drink, don't smoke, don't take drugs, even relationships and getting married. People are not even having children in the numbers they used to have because they are now less inclined even to engage in sexual activity because we are living in a safe world. It is almost dehumanizing us, wanting us to live lives of purity but safety. Another thing is a reason I think why people are pushed in this direction. And don't worry, at the end of this, I am going to give you 3 actionable tips as to how you can be more adventurous in your life, regardless of your age, all right? So that's coming. Hang on for that. But we're still exploring why people are more risk averse than they've ever been. I think a part of it is this hyper-visibility of the digital world. Because now, if you fail, if you open a business, if you have a relationship, if you take up a new hobby, and it all goes tits up and it flops, the business goes bust, the relationship doesn't work out, everybody in the world knows about it. And there's this terrible fear of a reputational damage to people today because if I do something, people I've never even met know about it because it's on LinkedIn, it's on Facebook, it's on the various other social media platforms from which most people draw their information these days. So that's another thing. People are frightened that if they try and fail, they will be laughed at. They will be poked fun at by people who they don't even see that often. But because of that digital visibility, it's going to be known. And it's going to follow you around like a bad smell for a long time. And it's going to feel like a public and permanent debasement of your character and your reputation. Another issue which feeds into this, I think, is parenting. We're all familiar with perhaps the term helicopter parenting. And as I say, we all want our kids to grow up safe and strong. But I grew up safe and strong, and my parents gave me an enormous amount of latitude to play when I was young and go out and take part in risky activities, to do things, go camping spontaneously up on the mountains of the Brecon Beacons, where I live very near. And I remember getting into a hell of a lot of scrapes when I was a young fellow. And did it harm me? Absolutely not. It strengthened me. It made me a much more mature, robust young person. But these days, parents are almost not prepared to allow their children to be children. They want them to be almost like a waxwork caricature of a kid which can be locked up at home. And yeah, you can do whatever you like, but you can't leave the house. You can play video games. You can observe the world through the window of your television screen, but actually go out there and live it and get punched on the nose if you're playing rugby or, play some other sort of sport in which there's a risk of violence and bloodshed, right? That used to be a rite of passage for young chaps. Today, it's something parents simply wouldn't countenance. They want absolute safety and security for their kids, and that plays across to schools even. When I was a kid, we used to go on all sorts of things with school, day trips here, there and everywhere. We were always doing something, always playing rough and tumble in the playground. Today, it's all been sanitized to a point where kids, are almost sort of wrapped up in cotton wool as they grow up, and they're not allowed to play outside the direct line of sight of their parents because everybody seems to think they're going to be abducted by a child murderer. But actually, we live in an era where violence against children and young people is at an all-time low. because of our knowledge of crime and how it works and the control of people who are involved in criminal activity than ever before. It's actually safer now than it was when I was growing up in real terms. But modern parents are afraid to let their kids be kids. And finally, and it kind of plays into that really, is the information overload that we live in. Because today, you reach into your back pocket or even on the wrist if you've got an Apple Watch, and you can be told of terrible news all around the country, all around the world in fact, which then propels you into a state of personal fear where it might be 1,000 or 100 miles away from where you live, and it will play no part in your life at all. But actually, we are just fearful of it happening to us, and we close ourselves down, we bolt our doors, we stay inside, we don't undertake risk because we're not prepared to fail, we're fearful of the damage to our reputations, and we don't even want our kids to be kids anymore. So, like I said, I do promise to give you a ladder to climb out of this risk adversity hole that I see so many people in today. And I'm not just talking about people in their 20s. You might be in your 30s and your 40s. Your prime of life. You are at the zenith of your capability of a man, yet actually you are living a very small world in the boundaries, within the walls even, of the home in which you live, fearful of stepping outside for the reasons that we've talked about. Now, the first thing I'm going to suggest to you is that you consider undertaking, not climbing Everest, right? Not making an attempt on the southern pole. That's been done now. In your life, we need to be aiming for more, what I would call micro adventures, because what we're aiming to do is to rewire your brain into being more confident, to trying new things. Because once you start that ball rolling, it will gather momentum, and before you know it, you'll be doing things, applying for things, joining groups, undertaking activities that hitherto seemed like they were well outside your comfort zone and things that you would never do. And the sort of things I'm talking about are things which are, shall we just say, mildly unfamiliar to you. They don't have to be massive leaps in your life, because if it's a massive leap, you probably won't do it. But if it's something which seems moderately achievable, you're more likely to give it a go. And quite often, things which have a beginning, a middle and an end, so you can chart your journey, and you've got, a light at the end of the tunnel, there's something you can achieve at the end of it, they tend to be the better little adventures to go on. Now, the sort of things I'm talking about, it can be, taking a community course in your local college. It could be learning a skill, picking up a hobby, doing a course, carpentry, poetry, playing the piano, learning to speak conversational French. It could be any number of things. It could be spending time in the outdoors, taking part in a 5K run, a 10K run. It can be learning how to light a fire from scratch in the outdoors and getting into bushcrafting. It can be learning how to cook or bush cooking, like I love doing, coming up here and cooking from scratch. It can be little micro adventures, things that you haven't done before, but you've always had a slight fancy to do. Now, why does this work? Well, like I say, it rewires our mind, and those little wins for us. Oh yeah, I did it. I did it today. I lit a fire. I did it today. I went for a 2K run. It's a step on the journey to my 5K destination, doing a park run at some point in the future. We're setting that little goal. We know what we're going to do. We've set the target. It gives us something to strive towards. And the consequences of that journey are tiny, aren't they? If we fail at any stage, it doesn't matter. So actually, when you undertake an activity in which the risk is tiny, you're more inclined to give it a go, because you've got nothing to lose other than to win something, and more knowledge, more skill, a step on the journey to the successful outcome which you set yourselves. That 5K run, lighting a fire, cooking a meal, learning French, it doesn't matter. Tiny little consequences make you feel stronger and more powerful. And I do recommend, as I often do, journaling, because you can write about your endeavour, and actually, even by writing it down, it strengthens your knowledge. It makes you analyse what you have undertaken, and it makes you think about the next step, and it makes you look forward to to that satiating feeling of achieving your outcome at some point in the future. So simply setting yourself a micro adventure next week. It can be something you can achieve in only a week of endeavour. It can be the thing which rewires your brain to living your life with more of a let's give it a try mindset. Sorry about that, folks. Fire was running down, so I just had to go and chop a log to give us a little boost, keeping us warm on this cool day. Now, my next small step for you on your journey to being less risk averse and more let's give it a try is think about the way you approach life as what we would call a reverse portfolio of how you lead your life. Now, what I mean by that, most people tend to live their lives, and we think about our lives as percentages of activity, right? Yeah, I do a little bit of exercise. I spend most of my time in work. I apportion most of my time to my family. What I want you to do within that portfolio is apportion 10% to adventure. Think of it like that. Think of it as a pie chart, and a little portion of that pie chart, which is your life, is 10% is undertaking more adventurous activity, right? Because 90% of your life is safe. It is maintenance work, really. The things that you normally do, going to work, spending time with your family, watching the television, all of those, I'm not going to say life-sucking activities, but they're activities for which there is no great adventure. It is what everybody else in the world does, and you could do it for the rest of your life, live your life, and nobody would rather know that you've done it because, you know, it was just somewhat mundane. But just eke out a 10% portion of that pie chart as adventure activity. And reserve that 10% for experiments in your life. The experiments we talked about, micro adventures. That's all you got to do. And it could be just starting a new hobby, starting that run. It could be trying a side gig. Maybe, when I retired from work, I looked at my life as a blank page. What are the things I've always wanted to try? A little bit of professional speaking, a little bit of well-being training, a little bit of YouTubing. And they were all little portions in my pie chart that I tried. I actually chucked more at it than 10%, but I was in a position I could afford to because I'd retired from full-time work. But for you, eking out 10%, and think of it, this is my protected time to have a little adventure, to give it a try. Label it in your calendar, in your diary. Could be a Tuesday night you put aside for that new hobby, or for going to that debating society which is in your nearby city. You've always wondered what that's like. Go along, go and have a look at it. Get involved. Join one of the clubs, one of the teams. Try a sport that you tried when you were a kid. Revisit it. Have a little bit of adventure. And when you think about it, 10%, it's not much of a gamble, is it? If it fails and it goes wrong, you could just try something else, because 90% of your life, the vast proportion of your life, is safe. It's cosseted. It is just the ordinary humdrum. And this is not what we want. We want to rewire that brain into activity which is more adventurous, because isn't adventure what life is about? And just plan one experiment per quarter, if nothing else, right? If you don't feel like trying something every week, one little thing a quarter. Go to a history festival, something I did earlier this year. I absolutely loved it. There's loads of things you could do. Try lighting a fire in the outdoors, going out for a trek, buying a book of hikes in your local sort of nearby community or country area, and just getting out there and learning more about nature. Doesn't matter what it is. It has to be something new to you, which is a little bit of an experiment that fits into that 10% of your pie chart. And before you know it, you might be pushing that angle in your pie chart a little more obtuse because you love it so much, you want to do more, and you're getting that feeling back in your life. Let's give this a try. Now, my final little tip for you, actionable tip, as I say, is to maintain within your life something which I refer to as a confidence ledger. Now, bear with me with this. You know I like journaling, right? So I like to write things down. For me, when I write things on paper, it's an opportunity for me to engage my brain and use the journal as my receptacle of ideas, but also a place where I can unburden myself without any fear of somebody, calling me out on it. It's my place where I can truly speak candidly. And within my journal, I have this little thing called my confidence ledger. So when I undertake an experiment, and believe me, I'm a bit of a harebrained experimenter. I'm always trying something new, going to new groups. I've got a few things coming up on my horizon right now. I'm starting up something called a silent reading club in a local community centre. I've got all sorts of nutty adventures going on. But these are my experiments. And I use my journal as a place to thrash these out because, I put simple entries, just date, outcome desired, actions taken, and then I keep a sort of running account of how my efforts towards these endeavours are paying off. Now, the benefit of this is every so often I get to look back on it, I do a little bit of a review on it, I see if it's a successful endeavour, I have new ideas about it, it takes me off in different directions. And I call it a confidence ledger because when I write these things down, when I look back at it, when I realise there's structure to my madness, I'm doing something sensible, I'm moving towards an outcome, and I'm learning from it. Because even when I have my failures from my micro adventures, it becomes fuel for the next experiment. Because even a failed adventure allows me to learn from it and gives me more chance of a success in my next micro adventure. Which is sometimes, this can be lost if you don't record it in some way. Now, I love a journal, right? I'm a pen and paper sort of guy. For me, it's not the same speaking or writing in the Notes app on my iPhone. I don't care what people says. There's a connection between mind, pen and paper which can't be replicated in any electronic format. And for me, that's how I do it. And it helps me build that evidence and combat the fear of failure. Because when I look at it and I realise it's not failure, it's learning. It propels me on to the success of my next micro adventure. It actually sets you up for having a go at it because actually even failure is success because it propels me towards more opportunities in the future. So those were my 3 actionable tips for you. Simple and straightforward, no rocket science. It is just really about building in micro adventures to your life, writing it down, as I say, this sort of journal of confidence, the ledger of confidence, which plays into my pathway towards Chap Nirvana. And just by doing these little things, you can rewire your thought processes away from being afraid of failure. And if you're afraid of failure, you don't put yourself in a position to fail. Whereas when you realise, what does it matter? My little micro experiments, if they go tits up, what happens? I just try again. I do something else. Nobody's going to know anyway. I'll just keep going. And eventually, you will come to a point where you're entirely comfortable trying new things. Saying to yourself, let's have a go. What have we got to lose? And let me tell you, when you can achieve that level of acuity within your mind that you're prepared to try new things, you're well on your way to Chap Nirvana. Because the man who is fearful of challenge is a man who no longer grows within himself. And he will not find that journey to Chap Nirvana an easy one. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget you can ask me any question you like. All you've got to do is drop me an email. I'd be delighted to hear from you, and quite often I make videos on the questions that I receive. I might not be able to solve your problems. I will simply give you my avuncular advice. As I say, think of me as Uncle Ash, and I'll tell you what I think. If you want to come on the journey with me to Chap Nirvana and see a bit more of my life behind the scenes and have contact with me personally, you can become one of my patrons. In the description box below this video, you will find the link to my patron pages. Now, I will say you don't have to pay to become a patron. Quite a bit of my material I don't put behind a paywall. You can access it for no cost at all. Of course, the good stuff you do have to pay for, But then I'm putting a lot of time and effort into that, but I would love you to come along on the journey in whatever level you would choose to join me. Until the next time we meet, I'll pose you the final question. What micro adventure are you going on next week? Let me know in the comments section below. Until then, take care.